Okay, so good morning, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Would everyone please rise? Mr. Smith, will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I will. Please join me. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good morning, everyone. Our first presentation will be by Mr. Brett Dorico from the AV Education Alliance. And before that, we will be doing roll call. Commissioner Brown? Commissioner Carter?
Present.
Commissioner Little?
Present.
Commissioner Smith?
Present.
Commissioner Underwood-Jacobs? Present. And Chairman Vieira? And myself? Present. Okay, Mr. Dorico?
Which one? No, I'm going to do the introduction.
Okay.
Sorry. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. Listen, I'm excited to bring forward to the Commission today as a project that you've been hearing about periodically from us that we were developing. And what it is an impact program to turn around truancy issues within our community. As you well know, you've heard in here, our truancy usually equates to a rise in our daytime crime rate. So this is something that we came together with Antelope Valley Union High School District and specifically Antelope Valley High School as a test project to see how we could turn truancy around in our community. So I'm going to introduce the main players in it. Brett Dorico, who's the Vice Principal at AV High School, and Brett will be leading the presentation. Nigel Hawley. Nigel works out of our Antelope Valley working group here, out of the mayor's working group here through the city. He's also our liaison to our community groups and advocacy groups out there. And then Jennifer Perscalo is going to be the representative from my staff that will be over at Antelope Valley High School managing this program along with other resources we're bringing to the table. So with that, I'm going to let Brett go ahead and start. Yes, Brett's my son, by the way. Okay, yes, it's shocking, I know. Okay, you'll even be more shocked afterwards. I've heard the comments from everyone I work with about they can't believe he's my child. So I'm going to bring him up, and then we'll go from there.
Thank you. And like my father said, thank you for having me today and listening to my presentation. So we can go ahead and get into it. So just like you said, this is a partnership between the city as well as the AV Union High School District. And it's just an effort to increase attendance as well as improve truancy at the high school level and see if we can impact students as well as families within the community. The main goal of this is to sustain student attendance as well as educational success and take a proactive approach. The current model we have in place is, in a sense, reactive. We have students who we will run queries, we'll run attendance queries, we'll have a student who kind of comes on our radar and we notice an attendance issue. From there, they'll see the CAW, which is our community attendance worker, who will then put tiers of interventions in place for the student, and then at the end of the day, if it is determined, they will be cited for a truancy ticket. What we're attempting to do is take a proactive approach, which means we want to try to impact the student and put levels and tiers of interventions in place that are direct impact, localization through community resources, and try to give actual interventions that can help students come to school and as well as tap into some of our programs and such that we have at Antelope Valley High School. Okay, so these are some of the things that we offer at Antelope Valley High School. We have rigorous academic programs. I believe we're going into our fourth year now. We implemented what was called the turnaround model at Antelope Valley High School, where we were able to bring in some staff members and an attempt to turn around the school. We actually just received, this was very big for us at Antelope Valley, we have a WASC, which is the accreditation committee for the schools within California. We just got a 6-year, so they have a 2-year, a 3-year, and a 6-year accreditation based on programs that you have at a school site. We recently just received the 6th year, which was last year, which is basically the best accreditation that you can receive. So we've been implementing and doing all types of turnaround procedures at Antelope Valley to help impact students. The district has actually implemented what's called PBIS, or Positive Behavior Intervention Support. So it's an attempt to, again, put tiers of interventions in place for students to, for the betterment of themselves. We also offer a Green Academy, which is a science academy that we have geared specifically towards students who are pursuing either engineering or business pathways. We also offer tutoring. We have rigorous tutoring programs every day after school. We have mentoring programs. So we have something called the ASAP program, the AAMI and AAFI, which stands for African American Male Initiative, as well as African American Female Initiative, which are targeted programs for particular subgroups to, again, help impact and sustain success. We also have a ton of athletic programs. We have a lot of things going on through athletics. I'm actually the vice principal over athletics, and we've implemented a mandatory tutoring program within athletics to where any athlete on the campus will attend an hour of tutoring daily. Okay. Also, we have various clubs and activities as well. So my whole point with this is we offer a lot, but if students are not in school, they cannot tap into any of these resources that we have available at the school site. So, and just like it says there, they cannot utilize these various programs that we have at AV if they're not in school. Also, our truancy rate. What we found looking at statistical data through truancy is that 3% of our population causes about 18% of our truancy rates at AV High School. So it's a smaller subgroup, but it's causing a big issue as far as truancy rate at the particular school. So that's going to be one of our groups that we kind of focus on and put interventions in place for these particular students. Also, the financial loss. The way that education is set up and the way that our schools are funded is based on enrollment. So based on your enrollment, we build programs, class sizes, pretty much everything we build at the school site is based on enrollment. Well, if the kids are not in school, not only are they not being able to tap into these resources and gain access to an education, but also financially we are not getting funded as a school as well as a district. And then also the impact on community. Thank you. So what is truancy? It is in the education code, okay? And technically a truant is missed 3 full days of school and or absent more than 30 minutes of instruction 3 times within a school year. So that's basically 3 times within a whole entire school year. If you miss 30 minutes of instruction 3 times or more, that is technically classified as a truant in the state of California. A habitual truant is if you have 3 truancies within a school year. Well, and these are, of course, unexcused absences. Okay, excused if the kid's sick and parent calls in, that doesn't fall under the same classification. And then a chronic truant is classified as 10% of enrollment missed. So based on how many days you've been in school, if you miss more than 10% of unexcused absences, you are technically classified as a chronic truant. So our role as a high school. We actually have a room in place for the city employees. In fact, that's where Jen will be working out of. We have a room basically specified for this specific program. We'll also have security on campus. We have our CAW as well as myself will be manning the program from the school site end. We'll also be pulling data. We'll also be looking at particular students and seeing, what students are truant and how we can impact these particular students. We'll also I'm sorry, if you can go back. Thank you, sir. Also assist city employees with the implementation of this model. And then again, me as well as the CAW will be doing all types of data monitoring to ensure that we are impacting our students. And I'll go ahead and have Mr. Dorico come up to speak on the city's role.
Mine's a real small part of this at this point. Part of the discussion is for us is where does our resource management come into? And as Brett explained about the schools, we put all these resources in place at school sites, but if students don't attend class, then the school gets no credit for that class period, and there's a monetary value related to that. And especially in a high school setting, because schools are based on period attendance, whereas grammar school, K through 8, is based on daily attendance. So it really has a significant impact based on period attendance at a high school level. What we brought to this is looking at collectively is how does this impact our community? We know a more educated community is a more higher quality standard of living in a community. So we want the students at that school to participate in their community as well as the activities of the school. And again, the turnaround model, just to give you an idea how that worked, is what the high school district did is without funding, they took all the staff out of the school. They put in a new administration, and they selected the entire faculty from throughout the district to take the highest quality educators they could to put into that school. And that's had an impact. Antelope Valley High School was it last year had the highest Read 180 scores, or the year before in the district. So they've done some things and implemented. And I think the focus for us is to make sure we get students in those classes so they can benefit from that. But our part of it is also on the city side of it, we also want to impact that daytime crime rate, which we know truancy, high truancy creates issues for us. The other thing is I want to minimize the time that the sheriff's deputies are tied up dealing with these juveniles out in the field. So this is more of a drop-off point for them at the school, and we'll manage the issue of that truancy at the school site rather than having the deputies' time taken up at a significant cost on each one of these contacts. So it's going to be minimal on the sheriff's department side, and we'll maximize that intervention with that student at the point at the school to work in that restorative justice model. We already have things in place we are already doing at the school here at the city with teen court and our community youth court that Jim runs, that we're already showing that we can have a significant impact on using that proactive model with our youth. So, did you just you moved me. Sorry, I got to see what else is up there. Oh, and what we're doing here is we're going to use communication resources that we have out throughout the community, the community services networking, and then administrative sites. We're working with the city attorney to develop a broader base for us to issue administrative sites to work in that diversion model. So we want to divert these youth out of their formalized system because, as I told you at the last meeting, right now what's happened with no juvenile traffic court, these citations are being sent down to Van Nuys. Mr. Foray down there has quite a significant number of those citations that they're having to deal with that diversion mindset. So we want to work collectively with them with things that already exist to divert more of those issues for probation as well into community programs that we can do here to restore in that restorative justice mindset. So I'm going to interrupt you right here in this part. I'm going to bring Nigel Holly up just to talk about how this interacts and with the community services networks, okay, because Nigel will be coordinating outreach to mentoring groups and that as well in the community.
Okay, one of the things we discovered is students are truant for a lot of different reasons. Sometimes they're truant just because they can't come to class and focus because they're hungry, they haven't had a meal the night before. Sometimes they're truant because they run into issues at home. They may have parents that work down the hill and there's no one there to see them off to school or receive them when they come home from school. There's a lot of different issues that affect the child that makes them actually truant. It's not necessarily just a situation to where the child is actually just a deviant. You do have your deviants that are truant, but then you also have other students that have other issues. So what we're doing from the standpoint of mentoring the children is we want to find out exactly what that child's issues are. So upon this child actually becoming truant, we're actually going to take an intake sheet on this child and create a case right there at AV High School. This intake form will address everything from do you eat dinner every night? Do you have someone greeting you who's helping you with your homework, so on and so forth, so that we can assess exactly what the needs are for that particular student, and we can address those, and we can utilize our resources to address those needs. One of the things that we've discovered is if a kid has a mentor, then they have a 90% success rate of turning around, just by having someone to pattern themselves after, someone to look up to, and someone to be in their corner to say, hey, you can do it, someone following up with phone calls, and actually taking an active interest in their lives. So what we're doing from the mentor standpoint is we're going to address where they're at, what their needs are, make sure that they have the basic necessities, such as clothing, transportation, food, and whatever else that they need so that they can be successful in school. And then we're also going to be following up with their teachers. We're going to be having access to pro schools so that we can actually look at what their progress is with grades. And what we consider a success is if we can get a chronic truant to the point where they've attended school 60 days straight without absences. We're going to continue to work with the kid even after the 60-day period, but we want kids that want to turn around and we want to be active in their lives. That's where we're at with the mentorship part. There's a lot of more components to it, but it would take a while to try to go over all of it here. but I will be here afterwards if you have any questions.
May I ask a question? I was just kind of curious. Is that how do we, and listening, I saw the programs that Mr. Rico brought up at the very beginning, program, after-school program, during school, whatever it may be. How are we getting that to, Mr. Rico, I'm sorry, how are we getting that to the parents? Right? What do we do to get that to the parent? And how can we educate the parents to the point of saying, okay, we've given it to our child's supposed to come home and bring that, and pretty soon it's in a backpack someplace else. What are we going to do, or how should we do, or is there an idea that you guys have talked about getting this to the parent to make sure the parent's on the line too, that make sure that these programs, that they're aware of these programs also?
Yes, typically we do have a process currently that we utilize to get information out to parents. We have NTI, which is like our messaging system that we, if Principal Radford will send out a message to the parents, kind of informative. We also have a back-to-school night. We actually just had that last Thursday. There's a lot of information on that night that we typically get out to the parents. There's a Principal Advisory Committee. There's a School Site Council. So there is some programs in place to get information out to the parents. Also, the CAW, with relation specifically to truancy, is kind of that person who bridges the gap between school and parent as far as kid if they're starting to have attendance issues. Our CAW will contact parent. In fact, on the next slide, you'll see there's something called the SART contract, which is the Student Attendance Review. I'm not sure what the T stands for, I apologize, but basically what it is a student we're starting to see truancy issues, the CAW will contact the parent, have a meeting with the student and the parent, as well as himself, to talk about not only why is truancy an issue, what interventions can we put in place for you as a student, but also these are some of the programs we have in place that we would like you to start tapping into. A very successful program, in fact, Nigel and I just met with some of our advocates for the AVID program, and AVID is very successful. We have a 97 and 98% graduation rate. And what the AVID program is, it's nationwide, but it's basically a targeted program for students to have almost like a mentoring program throughout high school. So we do have some programs in place. We try our best to get the information out there, but I think in relation to this specific program is when we call that student in, when we start asking them certain questions, the parent is going to be a huge component of this process. So that's when we're going to make the parent phone call or, even the personal contact of going to the parent's house and having a conversation with them there as well.
Thank you, sir.
No problem.
From what I've heard, it sounds as if this is the intake form is a needs assessment.
Yes, actually what we're going to be doing is a needs and services plan for each individual participant of the program to actually get an understanding of where they're at. And create something for them that they may have never had. We want to get them to the point where they realize where they are, they accept responsibility for being truant, and then give them a compelling future that they can look to. Let them know that, you're going to one day need a job. You're going to one day probably want to go to college. What I've discovered is, at least for some of the more deviant truants, is that they don't necessarily even believe that they'll live to be 18 or 21. And when you have that mindset, high school doesn't matter. And so what we want to do is assess their current reality and then create a compelling future for them so that we can change them. And like Brett said, the parents are going to be pivotal. And we will make home visits in some cases where, the kid just continues to be truant.
I have two questions.
Can we actually, if we would just allow the presentation to finish, and then at the end we can ask these concerning questions, because I think all of these questions will apply to the entire presentation that both of you are bringing up, which are exceptional questions. Because you have more to present, correct?
Yeah, there's a few more slides.
Okay, sure. And then we can all ask them at the end,
Sure.
if that's okay. Thank you.
Thank you. So the restorative justice model, like I stated before, currently we have in place, we do have interventions at the school site. In fact, I'll go ahead and get into the first couple. But then from there, ultimately at the end of the day, in a sense, it's punitive in the sense that right now we currently, at the end of the day, if you don't come to school, eventually you will get some type of fine, citation, etc. And then, like my father said, it is processed through the county. It is down in Van Nuys. It's not localized. So what we're attempting to do here is put other measures in place, other interventions in place before it gets to that step. So like I said, we do have interventions in place at the school site. we do run all types of attendance data, as well as students just loitering outside of class. We'll have conversations from security and from vice principal, and we'll make a call home. We'll try interventions at the school site. Saturday school is a way for students to make up truant absences, okay, like period absences or whatnot, so they can attend Saturday school, which makes up for 4 period absences, I should say. And then also the intervention of the SART contract. So if this is a reoccurring issue, that's when they sit down with CAW and parent and come up with some type of plan. But currently, the next step after that is if we keep seeing that pattern after that SART contract, it's a citation as well as a SARB review board. What we want to put in place is the community service aspect, kind of use mentoring, use programs we currently have in place within the city, especially through Nigel, to try to put other levels in place for the student. Because just like he said, and something I could tell you, I was a teacher as well as a counselor at AV High School before I became an administrator, and from the counseling end, I did see a lot of that. You understand why certain behaviors are happening, why a student doesn't want to come to school for that exact reason. There's other things outside going on, and that's why we want to meet those needs and demands of the students through this intervention process.
I think the other part of it is and through our model, and we've already shown that we've had great success through our community youth court in adopting that restorative justice model. So there's an accountability aspect for the individual that's committed the offense, as well as participation of their parents in a process to restore, make the school whole, make the community whole again. And that has to be a cooperative process. And again, for those individuals that aren't, we have other avenues that we can manage that through. But our hope is to encourage people to participate throughout this process for the benefit of that child as well as the community. Go ahead and go to the next one, Jim. Okay, so the implementation is, we've already presented the school board and got their blessing. Dr. Vieira's been on board for quite some time. We've already have the resources in place from the city and from the school, as well as we put the right players in place. Jennifer, I'm going to address your intake issue right now. Jennifer, along with the group, is going to manage the intake process for these students.
Good morning. So through a collective effort, we went ahead and made an intake form, as Brett and Nigel have both mentioned. So basically, I'm going to be the first person of contact once either the deputy brings in a truant or the CAW or security on campus. Not only are we trying to just get a little bit of information from them as far as their, just general information, name, phone number, date of birth, home address, parents' information, but as Nigel said, we really want to get a feel for what these kids need, what their home life is like, what their interests are, why they're not in school, what their reasoning is, and where they'd rather be spending their time. Just as an example, if we have a student or a teenager who likes to do graffiti, unfortunately that's a major problem for our city. Can we push them in the direction of an art class? Can we push them in the direction of something that brings out what they want to do and where they want to be, but still getting them an education and maybe even pushing them in a direction of a career? So we want them to take responsibility for their actions. I have put in here, through going over youth court paperwork and kind of seeing the way that they do stuff, I threw in a question, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Where do you see yourself in 10 years? Kind of trying to get an idea, again, of if these teenagers even think that they have a future and what they're capable of, so that we can attack that mindset. But we can't help anybody who doesn't want to help themselves. So we really need them to take responsibility for their actions and for them to come to the determination that they do want help, that they do want to be in school, and that they do need somebody to just care about them. So we'll go through that with them, and they will be given an administrative site, but upon concluding the truancy intervention model, it will be dismissed. And if they don't decide that they want to go through with it, if they leave us expecting them, I think we decided 3 or more times? 3 or more times where we make appointments for them, where they're supposed to turn in something to us, where they don't come to their mentoring or their after-school program or their athletic team. we will then dispo them from the program and move on to somebody who actually wants to be there. So our goal is really to help them if they want to help themselves.
Thank you. And in the vision of this program, what's the whole purpose? The purpose is not to be punitive, but to help students gain access to programs that are in place, to better themselves, give them an opportunity to, just like any other student out there, to have access to go to college, go to some type of post-secondary career implementation, and just try to help the student not only gain access to current programs, but also develop a vision for themselves. Where do they see themselves in 5 and 10 years, and can we put mentors in place to help guide that vision? Also, it's a proactive model. Again, how we talked about, in a sense, we are reactive currently. We want to take a proactive approach, but it's really to benefit all stakeholders, students, families, school, the city as a whole, as well as the nonprofit and mentoring programs that we have in place as well. And then the positives of it is it gives students an opportunity to have access to our programs, increase involvement at school, gives community a support system, helps document interventions to strengthen the SARD process, which is also a proactive model that benefits all stakeholders as well as localization. So it really just brings it home here with local resources.
Okay. Just last statement, and then we'll take your questions. But, one thing we pride ourselves here at the City of Lancaster specifically is that how we develop community partnerships. And I will tell you that through this process, it is really evident that for years of that practice that has taken place in this city came to light in this entire process. So we took people, initially, we think we're separate from the education system, but we're not. The school is a microcosm of what's actually occurring in our community. And so we see that. So by collaborative agreement with the schools, working with our staff here, and actually, like Nigel Holly's a perfect example. At one point, we were at odds with a certain group of organization that now we've come together to work collectively to resolve issues in our community. We've actually become very good friends in the process of it and really got to know each other. So I will say that that's the one thing I'm probably most proud of that we do here at this city, or in this community, as a matter of fact, is that we come together when we identify community issues and we work together as a community to resolve those issues. So, the kids are going to be, they're going to be us in several years from now. If you would have asked me back when I was in Antelope Valley High School that I'd ever be standing before a commission or the council or even actually working at the City of Lancaster, well, I'm sure the sheriff's station didn't think I would be either. But, I feel very fortunate to have grown up in this community with that type of mindset. So with that, we'll take your questions and hopefully we answer them.
Commissioner, comments, questions?
If I may. My question is regarding the intake process. I believe you mentioned the person that would actually be implementing it. However, how often is a follow-up for the children?
So after we do the initial intake and we determine what the needs are for the particular participant, we'll follow up as necessary. Initially, we'll be following up almost every day because we want to make sure that they're actually in class, that they're actually participating in the educational process. And then after that, I'll be meeting with them every Tuesday and Thursday for the following 60 days, between the hours of 2:30 and 4:30. And during this time, we'll be mentoring and we'll also be addressing whatever their other needs may be.
You mentioned the SARD board. Is that still district-wide, or is that site-specific to your school?
It's district-wide.
Okay, so they report there as well?
Yeah, we still have the SARD process in place. That is our current model. We have CAW, we have a SARD contract, and if the interventions that we put in place do not work, then obviously it goes to a SARD board hearing, and from there a determination is made. Specifically with AV High School, this is a pilot program. It's very fluid. There's going to be a lot of things that we develop as the process goes on, but this is a pilot program specifically at AV. So at all the other sites, they will be still using the SARD process, and this is actually just another step of intervention within the SARD process. But yes, currently it's just AV. Our hope is that it works and that we can grow it from there. But currently it will be a pilot program at AV, and the other sites will be using the SARD process as well.
Okay, sounds excellent. I mean, I'm very familiar with PBIS. We use it where I work, and I was on the SARD board for several years with Lancaster with the younger kids, and we found out sometimes they just didn't have clothes to go to school. They didn't have an alarm clock. You know, they didn't.
Exactly.
So there was something very simple fix, and it sounds like that's what you guys are doing with your mentoring program, and again with your alternative programs. I mean, sometimes we got kids, you know, guitar lessons if they wanted it, weightlifting classes, whatever it was, after-school activities that they wanted. Some of them needed drug treatment. Some of them, you know, like you say, once they realized what they needed and they wanted to change, then we got it for them. So it sounds like an excellent program.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
I have a question. In the course of your intake, I'm sure there'll be those times where you, and keeping in mind that this program is non-punitive, during the course of that intake, you may discover something that does warrant law enforcement or DCFS involvement. How do you plan to balance that within the program?
Well, I can say this. We're mandatory reporters as far as the DCFS issue. All that will be in place. And if there is something at a higher level that supersedes whatever our process is, then that will take precedent. So if there's some model there, again, you know, don't get me wrong. Yes, it's a proactive model, and we're looking to coach people up to be successful for their benefit and the community's benefit. But there's going to be those individuals that are not going to be someone that goes along with the program. We'll deal with that appropriately, whether that be law enforcement, whether that be whatever models out there. But I don't want to close the door on kids that may be on probation. Okay, they may have some other issue going on. Okay, so we want to work closely with all the agencies that exist within our community and tap into those community resources for a positive outcome. But yeah, I think, what's the term? It's not a hug a thug program. Okay, we're not going to do that. Okay, we're definitely going to have positive outcomes for kids that see what direction we're going, working with their parents to help them. A lot of times, and Jim can talk about this at some other point with the community youth court, since we have some new members to talk about how we do that. There's a lot of times that you have a single parent who has several children, and they don't really have the skill set to work with a troubled child. Okay, one that they're having a particular problem with. We want to work with those folks and give them the tools they need to manage that issue. So those are things that, as Nigel talks about and Jen's talked about, Brett here, is we want to explore those. So when we say this program is fluid and developing, it is fluid and developing. There's things that are going to happen through the process. It's not a rigid process. We're going to be flexible and identify what those problems are and address them.
I had one other question. In the restorative justice model, I saw that the parent fine was pretty far down in the hierarchy of things. How early do you notify a parent of the potential for them to be fined so they can get involved earlier in the process?
That's on the initial contact. That's what Brett talked about with the community attendance worker. That's their role, okay, or the vice principals at the school. In some schools they have deans, so as this expands, it's something, a program we'd like to see come back in the high school district, only because it lessens the burden on the administrators and creates a gap. I think for us is that parent needs to be involved from the start, but the parent do need to know what their responsibility is, and we've discussed that, how we want to provide that information to the parent, what their role and responsibility is, not only for participation in the program, but what the law says that they are obligated to do as a parent.
Thank you.
I have another comment. I think you pretty much answered that one. I was talking about parental involvement, which is crucial to that, you know, that form of recovery. But the Saturday school for the credit recovery, is it just for the kids, or do you actually get the ADA back too?
We do get if they attend for 4 hours, it basically rectifies 4 hours of a school that they've missed. So it's actually not credit recovery. What we typically do in a Saturday school setting is, let's say a student had 4 period absences. What our Saturday school teachers will do, we'll pull the kid up in Power School, look at their grades, look at their attendance, look at kind of what they're missing in their classes, and have them work on those particular subjects.
Any comments? Thank you so much for your presentation. I think it's a phenomenal program, and as you can see by the feedback and questions from the Commission, it's something that is extremely important to this community, and what's even more critical is that you've all identified the future of this city, and it starts at this age and at this time in their lives. So the mentorship, the extra tutoring program, and the identification of actually what causes truancy and the obstacles involved in it are absolutely astounding that you've already started and put forth a program to identify these concerns and actually find a resolution to. So congratulations, and keep us posted and let us know how this progresses, and if there's anything you need from this commission, please let us know.
Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Looking forward to your results.
At this time, we'd like to approve the minutes. We will be unable to approve the July 9th meeting because we do not have a quorum as to that meeting. However, we are going to approve the minutes for August 13th. And if I could get a second to approve the August 13th meeting.
I'll second.
Move for the motion to approve.
Yes.
Second?
Second.
At this time, we'd like to go ahead and move forward with Mr. Cobalt and his monthly crime statistics.
Thank you, Commissioner. This report, or the data in this reporting period, is for the 4-week period beginning August 3rd, ending August 30th of 2014. We can see here the 4 weeks of data. We're again sticking in that 80 to 80 plus ranges for Part 1 crimes for each week. That's not working to our benefit. We need to, at some point, we need to get that back down again. We take a look at the Part 1 crimes weekly average and weekly median. For this reporting period, we had a weekly average of 80 Part 1 crimes and weekly median of 84. The average is down a little bit from our average during the last reporting period, while our weekly median is up just a little bit. When we take a look at the Part 1 crimes by month, comparing month to month and year to year, the most recent data this morning showed we had 400 Part 1 crimes during the month of August. This makes it about the third highest month since May of 2010, so we're still bumping the top rather than coming down. When we compare September 14 to September 13, we're up 1%. Our crime rate for the past 12 months, when we calculate that out, given our crime frequency and our population, we're looking at 274.58. The ending crime rate for 2013 was 274.48, so we're a little bit above that now. We take a look at the most active reporting districts. There, 1135 had 44 Part 1 crimes, 1137 had 35, 1126 and 32 had 33, 1121 had 28, and 1127 had 24. We take a look at how that works out by density. In other words, where did these crimes occur? They're in basically the four same places that I talk about every month: the 10th and K, Valley Central Way, Lancaster Boulevard, and East Avenue J from Challenger Way over to 20th Street East. I have some additional information for you when we get to the presentation on the business improvement groups that really kind of focuses in on those four areas. We can see who's doing well and who is really maybe agitating some of those increases in crimes. You can see over here where we look over here to 20th Street East and Avenue J, you can see that has the highest density of red. That's because that's where the highest density of Part 1 crimes are. We take a look at residential burglary, which is always an area of interest for the city. We can see 1137 had 12. 1137 is essentially that area from, well, if we go back up. 1137 is basically going to be the area south of Avenue J and east of Challenger Way. 1132 had 9, 1135 had 6, 1192 had 6, and 1121 and 27 had 5. Take a look at larcenies involving vehicles. You can see these data as well, and these data are available on the city's webpage for the Criminal Justice Commission. We take a look at the 52-week trends. One way to look at data is to say, okay, how did we do so far this year compared to last year? And that's an acceptable way of looking at the data, but it doesn't tell you what's going on week to week. And so this presentation takes a look at each of the 52 prior weeks and tells us what's going on, and then it plots a trend line to show us what's trending up and trending down by various Part 1 crimes. Now, this particular data set runs from September 1st of 2013 through August 30th of 2014. What we look at first are those Part 1 crimes that are trending up. Assault is the highest level of Part 1 crimes that's trending up. Now, we can see the last few weeks. Now, the oldest date on this is over here on the left-hand side as we look at the graph, and the most recent is over here on the right-hand side of the graph. When you take a look at that, you can see the last 3 or 4 weeks have been down, but prior to that, we were up, getting close to our baseline. The baseline for assaults in Lancaster is basically about 15.09 per week. That's represented in the blue line that goes across just below the number 16 line there. Burglary is also showing an upward trend as we plot the trend line on it. We average about 23.55 burglaries per week in Lancaster. And you can see that there have been several weeks in about the last 12 to 15 weeks where we've actually broken over that baseline, and that's never a good thing for us when we get above that baseline. So the other thing that we can see when we take a look at this, though, you can see going back, say, 25 weeks and before, we would have several weeks, and of course this is where I talk about where we really make inroads into Part 1 crimes, and we reduce it. You'll see our even though we're showing an upward trend, the upper range of these weeks is not really all that far over the baseline, but the problem that we have is those weeks where things are really down, like they were back in week 53 of 2013, and those kind of weeks, those are the weeks where we make up for actually going over the baseline. And so when we lose those off of the right side of the graph, that tends to have an impact on our overall crime rate because we didn't get the decrease in frequency during those weeks. When we take a look at larceny, we can see that's also having an upward trend. And you can see there are several weeks where we go over the baseline. We average about 40.43 larcenies per week in Lancaster. And you can see in the last 10 weeks or so, we had several weeks where we were actually over that baseline. Larceny basically is theft. Then we get into the crimes where we're trending flat. And for us, homicide is an area where we're trending flat right now. Homicide is a very low frequency crime for Lancaster. Generally, our violent crime rate in Lancaster is relatively low. And that's one of the reasons why I attribute a lot of the fluctuations that we have to increases and decreases in population at any given time, because even though you measure it against a stagnant number as far as your population estimates go, your number is always going up and down as far as folks being either in Lancaster or out of Lancaster, and that has a little bit of an impact on the swings that we see in crime.
Arson also is a very low-frequency crime for us. We average about 1 per week in Lancaster, and you can see on this graph that we're basically flat, or maybe even trending down just slightly. And then the crimes where we have a distinct downward trend, rape is another one of those very low-frequency crimes for us, and we can see that we have a pretty distinct downward trend. We've had a few weeks where we've had 2 reported, but again, on average, about 1 per week. Robbery, we average just below 6 robberies per week in Lancaster, and you can see we have a pretty good downward trend going, and that's because of some of the good work that was done. You can see back in the early part of these 52-week, we were hitting 10 a week in several weeks, and because of some of the good work that was done over at the Sheriff's Station, you can see that number's been brought down and is continuing to go down. But the other thing where this particular crime, we can see those weeks where we had a really low frequency, like only 1 or 2 robberies, and that really works to our benefit when we take a look at the downward trend with that crime. Grand Theft Auto, you can see the last few weeks we've started picking up there just a little bit over on the right side of the graph, but we're still showing a fairly solid downward trend with it. This is how the Part 1 crimes laid out across the city over the measurement period that's in place here. And these are our locations that had 10 or more calls for service during this particular time frame, and you should have a copy of those in front of you. And of course, this is how the calls for service laid out across the city. And this is our crime forecast for September of 2014. We forecasted during the last reporting period 371 Part 1 crimes. We had an actual of 400, which gives us an accuracy rate of about 93 for that month. And that's pretty much the presentation. Questions?
Mr. Cobalt, you had mentioned that, I made a little note here on businesses that are participating, or I didn't quite understand what you meant on that, or working on those zones that keep...
Oh, no, that's related to the presentation on the business improvement groups when we get a little further down.
I have a question for you. In the course of the analysis, is there any correlation or parallels to enactment of AB 109 and the increases in the Part 1 crimes?
The city of Lancaster arrests approximately, of the folks that are booked at the Lancaster station, we get every booking slip from the Lancaster station, and we compare those booking slips to parole leads, to the database for folks that are on probation, and for folks who have a prior criminal record. When we take a look at that, on average, 8% of the people that are booked at the station are on some type of parole at the time they're booked. Within that 8%, the folks who are on AB 109 are carried for their first year in parole leads. So if they are arrested within their first year, then we catch them in the parole data. Within the scope of the folks booked at the station, and that's our only way to accurately measure that, we haven't seen a big increase of the folks that are on parole being booked. So if there's fluctuation within that 8% that runs on average. So that does, I mean, from our perspective, from a statistical perspective, it's not very significant.
Thank you. I can say this, that what we probably should bring forward, Commissioner Carter, is can we bring, Pat, what do you think about bringing the lieutenant back up from that unit that does the enforcement?
Yeah, we'll have to see who that is now, because that particular lieutenant's in a different position. I can tell you that Mr. Cobalt's research notwithstanding, we have the highest number of AB 109 releasees in the county. We're somewhere hovering around 400 at any given time. As of Monday, when I went to a meeting with the Attorney General of the state, their estimates of recidivism are hovering at around 60%. So if we have 400 AB 109 persons in the valley and 60% of them are going to eventually reoffend, then clearly we have a lot of criminals that are running around and looking for the opportunity or reoffending and may not yet have been captured.
With that in mind, with 60% of the population or population reoffending, did that spur them at that meeting to say maybe we should provide more resources?
Well, I don't know that the Attorney General's in a position to do that. Her office is beginning some new program that's targeting the recidivism rate through a variety of different programs, including reentry and re-education and trying to reduce the recidivism rate through the release programs that we've had difficulty receiving funding for at the county level. Hopefully there'll be some success there. Unfortunately, what the state has provided to the counties to manage the AB 109 issue have been woefully inadequate. Our current parole compliance teams do not do parole compliance checks anymore. The only thing they do now is search for absconders because they don't have the resources to actually do regular compliance checks. So that's obviously falling on the local stations, or it's just not getting done.
And funny how that's when it was enacted, that was one of the sticking points, and everybody told them we wouldn't have the resources, and they promised to provide the resources, yet we don't have the resources.
That certainly seems to be the case.
Mr. Carter, if I could, when we take a look at those numbers, though, it's interesting. I mean, I'll give you that. You're talking probably, based upon the captain's estimates, 200 to 250 reoffends. But I just want to make you aware that this station books somewhere between 10 and 14,000 people per year. So when you get to 200 people versus 10 to 14,000, I mean, there's a little bit of perspective there. So, I mean, just for your interest, it is an interesting issue, and it is a particularly of interest to the Sheriff's Department, and it ought to be, because some of these folks are very dangerous people. But when we start looking at the big picture, that's not driving our crime rate.
Understood.
Any additional questions? At this point, we'd like to move with the arrest statistics. Officer Ruiz.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I have the presentation for the month of August in comparison of July, also arrest statistics for starting with the burglary suppression team. The burglary suppression team and the rest of the other teams that I'm going to give you is pretty consistent. The numbers are pretty equal comparing July and August as far as number of arrests and incidents of those. Specifically, the burglary suppression team for the month of August, you can see felony arrest in comparison was a jump of 19. Of those 19, 2 of those were parolees that were arrested. Search warrants that were conducted during the month of August was 8, and additional arrest warrants. Suspects that were arrested that had warrants was 4. Ramey warrants, which are specific warrants that were identified through means of investigation, at burglary crime scenes. 5 were identified. So if you look at the number in July, you see Ramey warrants 6, and you look in the month of August, 4 of those 6 were arrested. So that's what that means, a pretty good success rate. So once we identify a burglar, and we know by name through means of investigation he's been identified, there's a warrant on the system, the burglary suppression team's been very successful in making those arrests for the majority of the time. The dollar amount for stolen property that was recovered, the value was $3,233, and firearms recovered, again, is pretty consistent with 2 compared to the previous month of 3 in July. And our LANCAP team, also pretty steady with statistics, 49 felony arrests, 3 misdemeanor arrests, firearms also 3. Parolees arrested of that 49 felony arrest was 10. And also the dollar amount for illegal narcotics that was seized was $7,808 and some change. A very significant drop from the previous month. A lot of it just has to do with sometimes you strike gold and you get a lot in value, and sometimes they don't have that much, the suspects don't have that much on them. However, you could tell that the number of arrests were still pretty consistent. One thing specific that I wanted to talk about the LANCAP team, not on the statistics, but was an incident of significance, was on the 28th of August. 2 deputies discovered information about a suspect who had been driving a stolen Chevy Suburban in the west side of Lancaster. What was significant of that is the suspect has had a long criminal history of being arrested. He was a known gang member. He was a white supremacist. So with the information that they developed, they did a search of a neighborhood in the area where they believed he was. He spotted the deputies on foot and ran from the deputies, and immediate containment was made. While the containment was ongoing, the suspect attempted to get away from deputies by attempting to carjack a vehicle. He was not successful in carjacking a vehicle by means of slugging the driver of the vehicle in the face. So with that additional information that we got from the witnesses, we located the suspect, we got that information and made that arrest. He was charged with multiple felonies. Fortunately, no one was, aside from the suspect, the victim that was punched in the face, no one was hurt. There was no danger to the community. Everything was locked down very quickly, and we made a very successful arrest off of that, amongst the many, many other arrests that they had. This gentleman was also a known car thief. He had a lot of shaved-off keys, which is commonly used to try and steal vehicles. So the number of keys that he had was indicative of he was either going to give these to other car thieves or he just wanted to get into a lot of different cars. Would help drop our crime rate as far as stolen vehicles. So it was a very powerful and very good arrest that we had from the LANCAP team on the 28th of August. Our narcotics team also, again, consistent numbers comparing July and August. 14 felony arrests. Methamphetamine dropped a little bit. Marijuana, they didn't have the big bust with 4,947 grams plus 13 plants. However, they're still consistent for the number of arrests that they had compared to the previous months. Search warrants, they executed 8 search warrants and no firearms were recovered at this point for the month of August. However, they have a pretty successful September, and I'm happy to report it will be a pretty big month for them. One of the next things that I wanted to do is, if you're familiar, the City of Lancaster is in contract with a program that's been around it will go on 24 months at the end of September. Next month I will have a quarterly report for you of the statistics of what the law enforcement aerial platform has been beneficial for us at the Sheriff's Department. Basically what it is, if you're not familiar with it, it's an airplane that the city has contracted with that flies around for several hours, 365 days out of the year, and it was specifically used and helpful in a barricaded suspect that we had yesterday. I'm not sure if many of you have seen the news or what was going on yesterday, but at 10:30 10:30 yesterday morning, a very young 50-year-old man, okay, and I emphasize he was young at 50, was arrested after he was barricaded inside his house for brandishing a firearm at court services deputies who were attempting to evict him out of his house. A containment was made. Multiple resources were dedicated for a safe, which ultimately was a safe and peaceful end of the 9-hour standoff, which happened out off of 4th Street near El Dorado Park. The school was locked down. The Sheriff's Department helicopter responded. They have capabilities and lots of equipment similar to the aerial platform. The thing that was indicative of what the city has, which is different from other areas, is that the law enforcement aerial platform not only helped as a backup, but also was the primary means of information for, you see the command post in there? We have a lot of decision makers, a lot of supervisors in there that have real live video feed of what's going on at the scene, and they're able to make very quick decisions as things change. The law enforcement aerial platform was instrumental in providing that information, that video feed, to them to help them with their decision making. And not only was it there for the long time, compared to a helicopter, without giving up how long a helicopter can stay on, helicopter burns up a lot of fuel and can only stay on station for a limited period of time. The fixed-wing aircraft was there for a whole lot longer period of time and very fuel efficient, and didn't cost nearly as much as what a helicopter's fuel cost would be. So we were basically overhead the whole time. And because of the law enforcement aerial platform system that the city of Lancaster has compared to other cities that they didn't have, it was great. And some of the comments I was hearing from some of the head decision makers up there is they're like, this is great. You know, we normally don't have this much information on a regular basis for this type of situation. So I'll give you that data for next month for our quarterly report for the LEAPS program.
Thank you.
No problem.
Any questions? Additional questions or comments?
Thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
And no questions, I just
Been
want to...
strikingly young today.
I just want to say thank you, and I appreciate everything that the Sheriff's Department does, and thank you very much for holding the line.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
And now we'd like to hear from the California Highway Patrol, Sergeant Robinson.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm here representing my captain who can't be here, so she apologizes. She had other engagements. The good news is all of our stats are improving across the board. Some of the big ones, our fatal collisions are down 19% year to date. All other injury collisions are down 8%. DUI arrests are up 29%. Enforcement contacts are up 32%. Speed enforcement cites are up 48%. Seatbelt and child restraint cites are up 15%. And cell phone usage cites are up 480%. That was a very significant jump. Last month we talked about our impaired driver task force that we were operating. We put 18 officers on the road. We had 18 DUI arrests, 3 felony arrests, and impounded 7 vehicles. So that was a very successful task force up here. I also want to point out that September 14th to the 20th is National Child Safety Seat Awareness, and my officers will be focusing on those citations and education about child seats and seatbelt use. And we will also culminate this event on the 19th at Sam's Club, installing seatbelts for those people, or car seats for those people that need it. Other than that, everything's looking good. The officers are out there doing what they need to do. Any questions for the Highway Patrol?
Any questions? With respect to the 29% increase in DUI arrests you mentioned, was that at all with regard to any specific program you had put forth? I believe it was at Labor Day weekend there were significant stops in the area.
We do have several overtime and grant details that we are running. This year we did 3 DUI checkpoints and I managed that. I moved them around this year to go to different areas to have a little bit more visibility and education. We also had significant hours for an individual DUI task force, and we're still working on finishing up those hours before the end of September. And then a roving DUI grant that we had. So some of those numbers did come from the extra enforcement on the road.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome, ma'am.
Okay, we'd like to move on to the District Attorney update. Mr. Franklin?
Morning. Again, I want to do the preamble. The statistics I have are for the entire Antelope Valley. They're just not for Lancaster. But for the Antelope Valley, for last month, we filed 327 felonies in the AV. And then to put that into context, our closest neighbors, San Fernando and Van Nuys, they both filed more. So San Fernando at 377 and Van Nuys at 383. So I think that's good that we're keeping our filings, that their filings are actually higher than ours, which would indicate I think we're doing a good job prosecuting as we're supposed to in the AV. As far as misdemeanors, since we handle all of the misdemeanors, and there's not an independent city attorney here that does do that, we did file an extensive amount at 703. And then our closest comparable city would be Compton, who filed 655. They don't have an independent city attorney either. So we do have a lot of misdemeanor filings, but we're good on the felony filings. We had some very good convictions last month. In particular, we had a very contentious trial with the dog mauling case in which the individual was convicted of second-degree murder. There is one other item that I think is worthy of discussion. I think something might be wanted to talk about next meeting. But there is a proposition that I just happened to look at the other day that will be on the November ballot. It's Proposition 47. And I was kind of surprised it hasn't gotten very much press. Not even talk radio that I've heard has been talking about it. But essentially, what it appears it's going to do is, right now, for instance, if you have straight, say you're in possession of cocaine or heroin, there's several rehabilitative statutes that are available, Prop 36 and then what's called DEJ. And if you are failing out of those, that would be the possession of heroin, possession of cocaine would be a felony. This particular proposition would make it mandatory straight misdemeanor. Also, as far as shoplifting, right now, if you commit 3 shoplifts, the 4th one can be filed as a felony. This proposition would prohibit that, and so you could literally, as I read it anyway, have 40, 50 shoplifts, and it's always going to be a misdemeanor. It's never going to be able to be elevated up to a felony. Grand theft, we talked about, grand theft autos. If you drive a vehicle like I do, which is not worth $950, I make a long trek, so I drive junk. But if that's stolen, it's not worth $950. That would be a straight misdemeanor. Car burglaries, if you break into a vehicle and you steal less than $950, he was talking about the individual with the shaved keys goes in, steals, a purse or something. That would be a straight misdemeanor. So I'm assuming it's under the guise of, again, trying to reduce the prison and jail populations. But it's something certainly that I think it's going to affect my office because if it does pass, then it is retroactive. So if you're incarcerated with that, 5th or 6th time petty theft, for instance, and you're serving felony time on it, you would be resentenced as a misdemeanor and out. So if you're not aware of it, I think it's something you might want to take a look at. It is going to be on the November ballot, and again, it's something you might want to discuss at the next meeting. But I did want to bring that to your attention because it will have effect certainly on my office and potentially on the crime rate here in the Antelope Valley. Also, if as I read it again, and I actually haven't gone into it in depth, but as I understand it, if you go into Walmart, and we get a lot of thefts out of Walmart, with the intent to commit a petty theft, that's also a commercial burglary, because you're going into a commercial building with the intent to commit a larceny. That could be filed as a felony. It's called a wobbler. It could be filed as a misdemeanor or a felony. But, depending on the individual, we might file it as a felony. It would mandate that it be filed as a misdemeanor. So it's an interesting proposition. So with that said, if there's any questions, it completes my presentation.
Mr. Franklin, how do you feel about that? Is taxing and having the pleasure of serving on the sheriff board and seeing what our law enforcement do up and above the call of duty constantly in your office too? How do you feel about that? I mean, you're going to be, if something like this passes, you're going to be impacted hugely. Your office more, and looking at this department that we have now is doing a fantastic job in the Antelope Valley and all ends of it. How do you feel about something like that? I mean, seriously.
Well, personally, which is why I indicated I think it's a good. It would be good for discussion. Personally, I think it's going to be very problematic for this city. Essentially, you'll have just constant recidivism. There'd be virtually no reason not to keep committing petty thefts or commercial burglaries, and I just touched on a few. It's also forged checks, some of the, writing bad checks, receiving stolen property. There's several things that would become straight misdemeanors if it's under $950. And we start hitting forgery and bad checks. That's pretty sophisticated stuff, and then that would certainly take the teeth out of the district attorney's office to really punish the individuals and make an example of individuals. That we will not tolerate this type of conduct in this community. I think that it's also very unfair to the small business owner, to the guy who owns or gal who owns a 7-Eleven. It's going to be an open-door policy of coming in and just taking stuff. And what about that poor guy or gal that's just trying to make a living? So personally, I think it sends the wrong message. And, I'm sure I'm not the only one who drives a crummy car. There's people that really do, I do it by choice, but there's people who really that's all they can afford. And they're doing what they can to get to work. And then you have somebody steal it. That steals their means of going and seeking or going to their place of employment and bringing home a paycheck for their family. So I think it's going to increase crime. It'll certainly it'll bring more crime into the community because it would be resentencing individuals who are already doing time. So I think it just clearly sends the wrong message, personally, from what I've seen, that there's really no consequence for your actions, and it's going to further burden the court system, it's going to further burden the district attorneys, and it's going to further burden law enforcement.
Yeah, sure is, yeah.
But I think it's serious enough that I wanted to bring this up, and I just happened to run across it. I just looked up to see what the ballot initiatives were going to be for November, and that popped up, and I started looking at it, thinking, boy, this is very odd proposition.
Well, thank you, sir. I appreciate it, and I like my crummy car too. So yeah. So, thank you, sir.
Thank you. It is very concerning, so thank you for bringing it to our attention. It's basically, what is most concerning is that would be retroactive, so all the progress that the city has made, your office, the sheriff's office, all together collectively, would be essentially going backwards. So it is something to look into further and hopefully get it out to the public about the pros and cons, obviously. predominantly cons from your presentation today.
Thank you. Yes, it's something that, the commission may want to, again, take a position on after examining it.
Thank you. And now we're waiting for Mr. Dorico for your Business Watch Subcommittee.
Yes, I'd like to pass over to Jim Coble to talk about Business Watch, and then I'll talk about public safety.
What I'm going to show you here are the graphs that we show the individual business improvement groups over the course of their thing. I'll start with the folks that are having the most success at this point. Valley Central Way and from Avenue J up to Avenue I. If you look at the two July of 2013-14 on the right of this, they're having amazing success. Now, a lot of what they've done is they've rolled out a lot of private security up and down the Valley Central Way. You can see during the most recent reporting period, they had 5 Part 1 crimes. And that's, if you take a look at the overall, there was a time back here where they had 23 and 24 and everything else. They had 5. And that's really the crux of being able to, one of the things that this city has endorsed wholeheartedly has been the broken windows theory. And when you take a look at the broken windows theory, one important component of that is making sure that property is tended, meaning there's eyes on the property, and having that presence of a good private security firm there when the sheriff's department can't be there gives that tending of property. And we can see the success, particularly in areas like this. When we take a look at 10th Street West and Avenue K, we can take a look at their success as well. Now, for the year, they're down 17%. You can see it along the bottom there, the year-to-year comparison of 2012 to 2013 and 2013 to 2014. Being down 17% is pretty good. For this one reporting period, they were up 1. It should be noted in the middle of this reporting period, the property manager on the southwest corner finally deployed a parking or a security firm in their parking lot. So now a great deal of that area will be patrolled by a security firm as well. On the east side of 10th Street, south of Avenue K, a firm, and coincidentally, it's also the firm that has the apartment complexes behind there. They have been showing some incredibly good numbers of almost 0 as we take a look at their Part 1 crimes. So we can see the impact of that and the success that has. Now, as we move over to Lancaster Boulevard, these data aren't for the entire Lancaster Boulevard, but if you looked at the density map that I gave you in the presentation earlier, you can see it really extends beyond Lancaster Boulevard from 10th Street west to Sierra Highway. It really kind of extends further on east on Lancaster Boulevard. But these data are just from Lancaster Boulevard and a block north and a block south from 10th Street west over to Sierra Highway. When you take a look at these data, we can see they're up 5% when we compare year to year. But as we take a look at it, the asterisk that's up here, when I made this presentation to the Boulevard Association, we didn't have a complete month yet for August. It was only through August 25th, I believe. And by that time, we still had 9 for the same time the previous year of 5. So we can see the activity is picking up in that area. We're showing month-to-month increases to a degree, and we're showing year-to-year increases. Now, this is East Avenue J, and from Challenger Way over to Valley Central Way. However, it should be noted in this data set that only 1 Part 1 crime of the 41 crimes during this reporting period were over on the corner of Challenger Way and Avenue J. Everything else was over at 20th Street East and Avenue J. In fact, 32 of the 41 Part 1 crimes were at Walmart. And Walmart, to their defense, sends multiple people to our business improvement group meetings and keeps us in the loop with the struggles that they're having with their corporate office. The big problem that Walmart has on the east side of town is convincing their corporate office that they need more resources here, and that's a constant, ever-present struggle for the local team over there and their regional folks. One of the things that I brought up to them this time, I did some research around on the web, and they have a system in place that if you take your shopping carts out beyond a certain point, it locks up the wheels so people can't walk off with their shopping carts. The same company that manufactures that makes a system for at the front door for shopping carts. So if it doesn't go through a checkout lane and is not cleared by the checkout person, it can't go past a certain point in the store. And that's actually the biggest problem they've got over there. They call it a push-out theft, and essentially folks go in, fill up their shopping carts, and just head for the door as opposed to going through the checkout lanes. So just by doing a little bit of modifications with an existing system they have, they might be able to make some improvements with that. Some of the other things that they're doing, they're going through a remodel over there right now, and they're actually going to put in place some of the defensive mechanisms they've got in some of their other Walmart stores in the Antelope Valley, which is a good thing. For example, in their cosmetics section, you will soon be having to check out right there at the cosmetics section, and there will be eyes on, and that's one of the big areas of theft that they have. And there are other areas within the scope of that they're making some improvements on. So we have to give them credit, but apparently the corporate level is a pretty big monster for them to wrestle with and to convince them. When we took a look at their demographic data for that area over there, it was way off of where we are in reality around that area. So they took a look at it, and they took the demographic data that we gave them and pushed it up their chain of command. So hopefully it has some impact on it as well. And that's it for our business improvement groups.
Just to address that for the new members, that's a program that we developed as we recognize that if you look on our crime mapping data, you'll see that most of these incidents in our Part 1 incidents are occurring around shopping centers throughout our city. Once again, being larceny is really the number that drives our crime rate. So based on that, we implemented strategies, and Jim and members of the staff meet with these groups, and we implement similar strategies of kind of what we do with Neighborhood Watch. Okay, but we talk about specific issues they're having, and then strategies for success. What we found initially was some of our larger big box stores, just as Jim brought out as far as an example with over there at 20th East and J, really had minimal security or loss prevention program or none. Okay, there were several that at a time point that they had a hands-off policy, so you could literally go in, take something and walk out and just leave, and then they would call the sheriff's department after the fact to take some incident report, but there was nothing in place on their side, so it became a huge resource drain. Now, working with them, we've had a lot of success, and the more, obviously, we want to encourage more participation in those programs. I can tell you things that we see around, especially at 20th East and J. If you see some of our crime numbers as you look in those two reporting districts in 1135 and 1137, they're driving a lot of our numbers. And I know the captain and Randy and the folks are developing strategies to deal with that, and we're always trying to do different things. We have a significant amount of population density there too, because there's a lot of multifamily housing in that area. So we have issues that we recognize there. It's just developing different strategies to deal with it. But truthfully, it's been a great program. I think we've seen marked improvement in the majority of the places that we've implemented these strategies, and the participation is encouraging. and we want to grow that. And we want to make that inclusive with our smaller moms and pops type businesses and things, because some of them have no concept what to do. So this is things to try and help them. On the public safety side, we have our ongoing Neighborhood Watch programs. We just had a great event Saturday night. If you have the ability to go attend our Celebrate America, and we're really starting to move forward into our event season here at the city. We have well over 20 events that the city sponsors, community events, as well as we have a lot of private entities that are doing things out in the community with car shows and things as well. Our office works very closely, and the Sheriff's Department as well, with our Parks and Rec staff and other departments within the city, of Public Works and everything, as we want to make sure we maintain a safe environment for our citizenry to participate in these events. And I can tell you, I've been here 5 years, and I know of 2 law enforcement incidents in 5 years at our events, 2. So I think we're doing a pretty good job. The participation Saturday night was amazing. We probably doubled the amount of attendance we did from last year. This event, Parks Department amazes me with what they put together out there, especially in such a large venue. And they had activities from 10th Street West all the way to the beach. It was incredible. So those are things we're going to really work on through this period of time, because we're tied up most weekends working with our other departments on these events. And then, again, the focus is, I'm glad that Mr. Franklin brought up this issue with this proposition. It's certainly something that I believe is appropriate for us to discuss in here, make some recommendation to the City Council to formally maybe put something forward as far as an opinion, whether they support it or don't support it or whatever. But I think for the purposes of the community, we need to have that discussion, because it's presented in a different manner, and we all know how some of these things can be portrayed on a ballot versus what they actually are when you read them. So it's a big concern, as you will see as you read it. That's it.
I, for one, am just kind of taken aback by the sheer lunacy of Prop 47. So I'm probably not alone in that in this room. So, right. But as far as the shopping cart issue that you talked about, is there anything the city can do from a code enforcement position to help bolster their position so they can get that system put in? Because it would also help cut down the shopping carts in the community.
Probably not from a code enforcement perspective. I mean, we don't really regulate anything that goes on inside of the big box stores. I mean, some jurisdictions do. Some jurisdictions actually mandate for every so many feet of square foot you have so many on-duty loss prevention folks, but we don't do that.
Well, I'm not speaking specifically looking at it from the law enforcement perspective. However, you got something?
Well, I can tell you that we have that in our service contracts with certain large stores. That already exists. There's a requirement, like for Walmart example, okay? And there's some issues that we've talked with that they have electronic locking device that does not, those carts should not leave a certain vicinity from that location. But as their patronage increased, they had to bring in other carts that did not have those similar devices, but we'll work closely with them. And that is an issue that we discuss all the time. We have a current contract for a provider that picks up those carts in areas of the city. But again, what Jim's talking about is how does it present itself to the community? Okay, if there's a lack of attention on issues, that's landscaping, septet issues, trash, those all things lead to the mindset that makes the criminal element more comfortable to operate in a certain location. And that's certainly one of them that contributes to that as well.
Okay, if there are no commissioner comments with respect to that, we can move forward with public business from the floor on non-agendized items. This portion of the agenda allows an individual the opportunity to address the Criminal Justice Commission on any item not on the agenda. And we actually have one speaker card for Mr. David Paul. Would you please come forward?
Commissioners, good morning. It's a joy to come here. I was inspired by the school, and then we get into these other discussions. There's so many things that are interrelated, and I'm reminded that we really can't solve any of these problems. We have to work at them. The school thing is near and dear to me. I had trouble growing up. I was truant a lot, and I'm just glad that I wasn't put into the system because of my truancy. Somebody mentioned the mentoring, and I think that's the single most important thing, is when a young person who doesn't have anybody to care for them can just be recognized as important. And, I think back, I've mentioned this before, but this struck me because Gary Gilmore was executed in Utah by our firing squad. He's a mass murderer, and he was interviewed right before he died, and the guy asked him, what could have been done for you? And he said that, and I take this seriously, he said that by the time he was about 11 years old, that was the last time that he could have been reached. So this has to be done early. Some of these children don't have any parental influences, and the ones that they do have are not very good ones. So it's hard to hold that against them. And then I know that there are other people that are born bad. I mean, kids growing up with me that were just into robbery and they just gravitated to prison. So it's a complex issue, but I am so proud that you guys work so hard, and I don't know how law enforcement does it. Keep your spirits up, knowing that the job may never end, but you do get to do some good, because there are good things that come out of this. So the mentoring program, Mr. Drico, that's awesome. Letting the kids know that somebody cares. It's not easy to just come up with anything to do about this, and that's why I'm so proud that you guys are hitting it head on and just letting some of these young people know that somebody actually cares about them. So I love it. I love it. I love it. I just want to thank you all for what you do. I'm the kind of guy that always wants to solve something. And when I read in the paper about that guy that beat the little 2-year-old girl to death, my question is, why is he breathing? Right? That's my feeling. And so when we can correct some of this stuff and have actual consequences for some of these behaviors, we'll see a difference. And the law gets in the way of that a lot of the time. It just has us all having to deal with it. So thank you so much. It's inspiring to be here. Commissioner Little,
thank you, Mr.
how do
Paul.
the kids know, right? I wish we could do more to get them to understand how much you all care. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And at this point, are there any additional commissioner comments for today's meeting? No? Then our next scheduled meeting will be Wednesday, October 8th at 10 a.m. And this meeting is adjourned.